Marcus Chen stared at the blinking cursor on his holographic display, the empty job posting form mocking him from across his cluttered home office. Outside his Seattle apartment window, the city's skyline told the story of humanity's rapid evolution gleaming. Alien architecture intertwined with traditional buildings, anti-gravity vehicles humming through designated air lanes like mechanical birds. It had been 3 years since first contact with the Vexery, and Earth still felt like it was catching up to the universe. The sound of shattering glass from the kitchen snapped him back to reality. Marcus rushed toward the noise, finding his 5-year-old daughter Zara standing amid the remains of what had once been his favorite coffee mug. Her dual heritage showed clearly in moments like these, human tears streaming down cheeks that shimmered with the faint, bioluminescent patterns inherited from her Vexery mother. "I'm sorry, Daddy," Zara whispered, her small hands glowing with residual energy. "I was trying to reach the cereal, and the floaty thing happened again." Marcus knelt beside her, carefully avoiding the glass shards as he pulled his daughter into his arms. The floaty thing was her emerging telekinetic abilities, a gift from her mother's side that manifested during emotional stress. At 5 years old, Zara had already shown more psychic potential than many adult Vexery, but controlling it remained a challenge. "It's okay, little star," he murmured, using the pet name Alina had given her. "Accidents happen. But remember what Mommy taught you about breathing when the energy builds up." Zara nodded solemnly and took 3 deep breaths, the glow fading from her fingertips. Marcus had learned these techniques from Alina during their brief but intense marriage, though his own human mind could never truly comprehend the mental disciplines required for psychic control. His communication device buzzed insistently from the office. Dr. Harrison's voice echoed through the apartment speakers, impatient and demanding. "Chen, where's the quantum resonance calibration report? The Vexery delegation arrives in 6 hours, and they're expecting our preliminary findings on the communication array project." "Transmitting now, sir," Marcus called back, though the report remained frustratingly incomplete on his desk. Between single parenthood and his demanding position as lead scientist on humanity's most ambitious projects, creating the first stable quantum communication link between Earth and Vexery space, he felt stretched beyond his limits. Mrs. Patterson there, an elderly neighbor who had been watching Zara while Marcus worked, had announced her departure for Luna Colony just 3 days ago. Her granddaughter had secured her a position at the Lunar Research Facility, leaving Marcus scrambling for alternative childcare. Regular babysitters couldn't handle Zara's unique needs, and specialized care for hybrid children remained expensive. "And rare, Daddy? Are you sad?" Zara asked, her inherited empathic abilities picking up on his emotional turmoil. Like many human Vexery hybrids, she could sense feelings as clearly as colors. "Just worried about work, sweetheart," Marcus said, forcing a smile as he cleaned up the glass. "But everything will be okay. How about some breakfast?" As he prepared her meal, Marcus's mind wandered to Alina. They had met during the initial cultural exchange program, when humanity was still reeling from the discovery that we weren't alone in the universe. She had been a xenobiologist studying human emotional responses, while he worked on adapting Earth's communication systems for interstellar use. Their relationship had bloomed quickly, a whirlwind romance that defied the political tensions between their species. Elena's death in a shuttle accident, 2 years ago, had shattered Marcus's world. Official report called it pilot error, but Marcus suspected the anti-alien extremist group Terra Pure had been involved. They had been targeting mixed couples, claiming that human-alien relationships weakened humanity's genetic integrity. Now, watching Zara use her small fingers to carefully pick up cereal pieces, Marcus saw Alina in every gesture. The way she tilted her head when concentrating, the soft humming sound she made when content, and the natural grace that came from her Vexery heritage, reminders of the love he had lost. His workstation chimed again, and Marcus reluctantly returned to his desk. The Quantum Communication Project represented humanity's best hope for establishing reliable contact with other worlds. It's potentially opening trade routes and scientific exchanges that could benefit everyone. But the technical challenges seemed insurmountable. especially with his divided attention. The job posting form still waited on his screen. Marcus began typing quickly, knowing that every moment of delay meant another day of impossible juggling. Between his responsibilities as a father and a scientist, experienced caretaker needed for exceptional 5-year-old human vexery hybrid, must understand psychic development and be comfortable with unique dietary and emotional needs. Immediate start required. Excellent compensation for the right candidate. He paused, then added, seeking someone who can be part of our family, not just an employee. After posting the advertisement on the interspecies job network, Marcus returned to find Zara building elaborate structures with her cereal, using tiny bursts of telekinesis to stack the pieces impossibly high. "That's amazing, little star," he said, genuinely impressed by her growing control. "Mommy showed me in my dreams," Zara replied matter-of-factly. As if conversing with deceased parents through dream states was perfectly normal, Marcus's breath caught. Alina had mentioned that powerful vexery could sometimes maintain emotional connections across the barrier between life and death, but he had dismissed it as grief-fueled wishful thinking. Seeing Zara's casual acceptance of the phenomenon made him wonder if there were aspects of his daughter's heritage he still didn't understand. The communication device buzzed again, but this time it wasn't his boss. The job posting had already generated 3 responses, and Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with anxiety. Finding the right person to care for Zara would change everything, but trusting someone new with his most precious treasure seemed impossible. Still, as he watched his daughter's cereal sculpture wobble dangerously, held aloft only by her concentration and inherited alien abilities, Marcus knew he had to try. Somewhere out there was someone who could help them both navigate this strange new world they called home. Kaylin Thorne adjusted her worn jacket as she approached the towering residential complex in Seattle's Tech District, her violet eyes scanning the building's mixed architectural styles, human concrete foundations supporting graceful Vexoria crystalline upper floors. The integration of their species' building techniques had created something beautiful, though she suspected most humans still felt uncomfortable living so closely with alien technology. 3 months on, Earth had taught her that finding work as a refugee wasn't easy, especially when she couldn't reveal her true background. The job posting for a caretaker position had caught her attention not because of the generous salary, but because of the phrase, "part of our family." After fleeing the suffocating expectations of Vexery nobility, the idea of belonging somewhere again felt like a distant dream. She had been Princess Kelena Stora, Thorn of the Third House, destined for a political marriage that would unite 2 of Vexery's most powerful families. Instead of submitting to a loveless union with a male she barely knew, she had stolen aboard a cargo transport to Earth, trading her title for freedom. Now she cleaned offices at night and served processed food during the day, living in a cramped apartment with 3 other Vexery immigrants. The building's security system scanned her biometrics as she approached the elevator. Her royal identification had been wiped from all official databases, but the quantum signatures embedded in her DNA couldn't be completely erased. She held her breath, hoping the simplified Earth systems wouldn't detect her noble lineage. The elevator hummed upward, carrying her toward what might be another rejection. She had applied for dozens of positions, but most humans remained suspicious of Vexery, especially young females. The recent terrorist attacks by the Terra Pure movement had made things worse. Some employers afraid to hire aliens for positions involving human children. Apartment 47C had a simple nameplate reading M. Chen. Helen could sense emotional turbulence through the door before she even knocked. Years of training and empathic reading, a skill all Vexery nobility learned for political negotiations, told her that whoever lived here carried deep grief mixed with desperate hope. The door opened to reveal a tall human male with dark hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked exhausted, with the slightly rumpled appearance of someone juggling too many responsibilities. Marcus Chen, she presumed, studying his face for signs of the prejudice she had encountered elsewhere. "Miss Thorne?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of surprise. "Thank you for coming. I have to admit I wasn't expecting someone so young." Kellen straightened her shoulders, drawing on the poise her tutors had drilled into her since childhood. Age doesn't always correlate with capability, Mr. Chen. I may be 22 in human years, but my species matures differently than yours. I assure you I'm qualified to care for your daughter. She had researched his background before applying a brilliant quantum physicist whose wife had died in a suspicious shuttle accident. The official reports claimed pilot error. Kellen's contacts in the refugee community whispered about Terrapure involvement. Dr. Alina Vasquez-Toon had been well known in xenobiology circles, and her murder had sent shockwaves through the human vexery scientific community. Please, come in, Marcus said, stepping aside. Zara's in the living room watching educational programs. She's shy with strangers sometimes. The apartment reflected its owner's dual focus on cutting-edge science and single parenthood. Advanced holographic displays shared space with scattered children's toys, while the kitchen showed evidence of someone learning to cook for a child with specialized dietary needs. Vexery hybrids required certain trace minerals that didn't occur naturally in most human foods. A small voice piped up from the sofa. Daddy, is that the new babysitter? Kellen's breath caught as she saw Zara for the first time. The child was absolutely beautiful. With her father's dark hair but skin that held the subtle luminescent quality of vexery heritage, her eyes were the most striking feature, completely human in shape, but shifting between brown and violet depending on the light. I'm not a babysitter, Kalen said gently, approaching slowly. I'm hoping to be your friend and helper. Right. My name is Kalen. Zara tilted her head, and Kalen felt the child's natural empathic abilities brush against her mental shields. Most humans couldn't sense psychic contact, but Kalen's royal training had included extensive mental defense techniques. She carefully lowered her barriers just enough to project warmth and safety. You feel sad, Zara observed with the blunt honesty of childhood, but not scary sad, more like lonely sad. Marcus looked mortified. Zara, you know better than to read people without permission. It's all right, Kalen said quickly. She's just using her natural abilities. On Vexery, children her age begin formal training in empathic etiquette. Her instincts are actually quite advanced. She knelt to Zara's eye level, careful to maintain the submissive posture that Vexery used when approaching another's offspring. You're right that I feel lonely sometimes. I miss my family, even though I can't see them anymore. Do you ever feel that way about your mother? Zara nodded solemnly. Mommy visits me in dreams sometimes. She says Daddy needs help because he's trying to do too many things at once. Marcus's eyes widened in surprise, but Kalen simply smiled. Your mother sounds very wise. What kinds of things does she tell you? Zara launched into a detailed description of her dream conversations. Kalen caught Marcus watching her with growing interest. Unlike most humans, he didn't seem disturbed by his daughter's unusual abilities. Instead, he appeared fascinated by Kellen's easy acceptance of concepts that most of his species found unsettling. You mentioned formal training, Marcus said during a pause in Zara's chatter. Are you familiar with hybrid development patterns? I studied xenobiology before coming to Earth, Kellen replied, which was technically true. Royal Vexery received education in multiple scientific disciplines, though she glossed over the specifics of her background. Human Vexery children develop unique challenges as their dual heritage manifests. Zara's psychic abilities will continue, strengthening until adolescence, but without proper guidance, they could become overwhelming. She demonstrated by gently projecting a sense of calm toward Zara, who immediately relaxed against the sofa cushions. The technique was subtle enough that Marcus might not notice, but it showed her competence in handling hybrid children. That's remarkable, Marcus breathed. Most caretakers I've interviewed seemed afraid of her abilities. Fear comes from misunderstanding, Kalen replied. Your daughter is gifted, not dangerous. She just needs someone who can help her learn, control, and appreciate both sides of her heritage. Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus's workstation chiming urgently. He glanced at the display and winced. I'm sorry, I need to take this. The project I'm working on has some strict deadlines. As he stepped away to handle the call, Kalen found herself alone with Zara, who was studying her with the intense, focused children reserved for particularly interesting adults. Are you going to stay? Zara asked hopefully. That depends on whether your father thinks I'm the right fit, Kaelin said honestly. I think you are, Zara declared, with the certainty that only children possess. You make the air feel happier, Kaelin's heart clenched with unexpected affection for this brave little girl who had inherited 2 species worth of challenges. She thought of her own childhood lonely, despite being surrounded by servants and tutors, preparing for a destiny she never wanted. Maybe helping Zara grow up with more choices would give her own life new meaning. When Marcus returned from his call, his expression was stressed but hopeful. Sorry about that interruption. The Vexery delegation is arriving ahead of schedule, and my team needs additional calibration data. You're working on the quantum communication project, Kaelin? Realized that's incredibly ambitious. If successful, it could revolutionize interstellar relations. Marcus looked surprised that she understood the implications. Most people think it's just fancy technology, seem to grasp the bigger picture. Communication is the foundation of understanding between species, Kaelin replied, thinking of all the political negotiations she had observed in her father's court. Without it, we remain strangers sharing the same space. Something shifted in Marcus's expression as he looked at her. A spark of recognition that suggested he saw her as more than just a potential employee. Kaelin felt an answering flutter in her chest, dangerous and unexpected. She had fled one complicated situation involving her heart. She couldn't afford to fall into another. But as Zara slipped her small hand into Kaelin's, trusting and warm, she realized that some risks might be worth taking. 2 weeks into her employment as Zara's caretaker, Kaelin had settled into a comfortable routine that felt more natural than any life she had known. Mornings began with helping Zara practice her emerging psychic abilities, simple exercises and moving small objects and reading emotional colors in the air around people. Afternoons were spent in the building's community garden, where Kaelin taught her young charge about the subtle differences between earth plants and their Vexery equivalents. Marcus worked long hours preparing for the communication array's first test, often returning home after Zara's bedtime. But Kaelin began noticing the small ways he tried to connect with her, leaving her favorite earth beverage in the kitchen, asking her opinion on Zara's educational programs, and lingering for conversations that stretched well beyond necessary work updates. She found herself looking forward to those moments more than she should. There was something about Marcus's quiet intelligence, an obvious devotion to his daughter, that made her heart race in ways she had never experienced during her years of formal courtship on Vexery. The political matches arranged by her family had been based on genetic compatibility and strategic advantage, not the warm flutter she felt when Marcus smiled at her across the dinner table. The crisis began on a Tuesday evening when Kaelin was preparing Zara for bed. The child had been unusually emotional all day, her empathic abilities picking up on her father's increasing stress about the project deadline. Marcus had worked late again, missing dinner and their usual bedtime story routine. "I want Daddy," Zara announced, her lower lip trembling as Kaelin helped her into pajamas decorated with cartoon spaceships. "He'll be home soon, little star," Kaelin said gently, using the pet name she had heard Marcus call his daughter. "About we read that book about the brave space princess?" "No." Zara's frustration exploded outward in a wave of psychic energy that made every loose object in the room rattle. I want Daddy now." Kaelin recognized the signs immediately, an emotional cascade that could trigger a full psychic manifestation if not controlled quickly. She had seen similar episodes in young Vexery nobles, though Zara's hybrid nature made her abilities more unpredictable and potentially more dangerous. "Zara, look at me," Kaelin said firmly, dropping to eye level and projecting calm as strongly as she dared. "Remember your breathing exercises. In through your nose, out through your mouth." But the child was too upset to focus. Her emotional turmoil created a feedback loop with her telekinetic abilities, causing the very air around them to shimmer with unstable energy. The apartment's lights flickered, and Kaelin heard something crash in the kitchen. Then, with a sound like tearing silk, a quantum field erupted around Zara's bed. Kaelin's royal training kicked in automatically. She had learned to recognize quantum disturbances during her education in advanced Science's knowledge that was now critically important, as she realized. Zara had somehow tapped into the same fundamental forces that Marcus's communication array was designed to manipulate. The field was growing, warping spacetime in ways that made the room's geometry seem to bend and twist. If it destabilized completely, it could tear a hole in reality itself, something that had happened exactly once in recorded Vexery history, destroying an entire research facility. Without hesitation, Kaylin threw herself into the quantum field, using her own psychic abilities to create a stabilizing counterpoint to Zara's chaotic energy. The sensation was like diving into liquid lightning, every nerve ending on fire as competing forces of reality pulled at her consciousness. Zara. She called out, her voice distorting as it passed through the quantum disturbance. Feel my energy. Match your breathing to mine. Through the swirling vortex of twisted space-time, she saw Zara's terrified face and reached out with both her physical and psychic presence. The child's small hands found hers, and Kaylin immediately began projecting the deep, meditative calm she had learned in her royal training. It took every ounce of her strength and skill. But gradually, the quantum field began to collapse in on itself. The room's geometry snapped back to normal with an audible pop, leaving them both gasping on the bedroom floor amid a scatter of toys that had been twisted into impossible shapes. Kaylin, Zara. Marcus's voice echoed from the front door, panic evident as he took in the apartment's disheveled state. He appeared in the bedroom doorway just as Kaylin pulled Zara into her arms, both of them shaking from the after effects of quantum exposure. His face went pale as he surveyed the damaged scorch marks on the walls. Toys fused into geometric impossibilities, and the lingering ozone scent that indicated massive energy discharge. What happened? He asked, rushing to kneel beside them. Quantum. Cascade triggered by emotional distress, Kaylin replied, her voice hoarse from the strain. Zara's hybrid abilities interact with spacetime in ways that pure Vexery or human children couldn't achieve. She's incredibly powerful, Marcus. Marcus gathered both of them into his arms, his relief palpable as he confirmed they were unharmed. I felt the disturbance all the way from the lab as the monitoring systems went crazy, detecting quantum fluctuations from this exact location. You felt it at the lab? Kaylin asked, suddenly understanding the full implications. Marcus, that means Zara's abilities are operating on the same frequency as your communication array. She's not just psychically gifted, she's a natural quantum manipulator. The three of them sat on the bedroom floor, processing this revelation. Zara had fallen asleep from exhaustion, her small body curled between the two adults who cared for her most. In the aftermath of crisis, Kaylin became acutely aware of how natural it felt to be held by Marcus. How right it seemed for them to face challenges together. You saved her life, Marcus said quietly, his hand stroking Kaylin's hair with gentle reverence. If you hadn't stabilized that field, ... She would have learned to control it eventually, Kaylin replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. I just helped her find her center a little sooner. How did you know what to do? Most people wouldn't even recognize a quantum cascade, let alone know how to stop one. Kaylin hesitated, knowing that her answer would reveal more about her background than she had intended to share. My education was more comprehensive than I initially mentioned. Royal Vexery received training in advanced sciences, including quantum mechanics and psychic field manipulation. Marcus's eyes widened. Royal? Kaylin, are you? I was, she said quickly. But I gave that up when I came to Earth. I'm just Kaylin. Thorn, now caretaker and friend, to a very special little girl. Instead of pulling away, Marcus's arms tightened around her. Why did you leave? Because I wanted to choose my own path instead of having one chosen for me, she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Because I believe that love should be a choice, not a political arrangement. The air between them seemed to shimmer with possibility, and Kaylin realized that the quantum field wasn't the only thing that had fundamentally shifted tonight. Marcus was looking at her not just as Zara's caretaker, but as a woman who had risked everything to protect his daughter. Kaylin, he said softly, her name like a prayer on his lips. Yes, would you be willing to choose us, to be part of our family? Not just as an employee, but as ... Something more? Her heart hammered against her ribs as she considered the weight of his question. She had fled one destiny, only to find another. But this one felt like coming home, rather than accepting imprisonment. I think, she said carefully, that some choices are worth the risk. When Marcus kissed her, gentle and questioning, Kaylin felt the last of her walls crumble. She had spent her whole life preparing for a future she didn't want, but holding this man and his remarkable daughter felt like the first real decision she had ever made. Outside, Seattle's skyline glittered with the lights of two species learning to build a life together. And for the first time since arriving on Earth, Kaylin truly felt like she was home. The morning after the quantum cascade incident, Kaylin woke to find Zara curled against her side in the guest bedroom, seeking comfort after her frightening experience. Marcus stood in the doorway with 3 cups of coffee, or rather 2 coffees, and 1 cup of the Vexery morning beverage that helped metabolize lingering quantum energy. "How did you know about the metabolic requirements?" Kaylin asked, touched by his thoughtfulness as she accepted the warm cup. "I researched hybrid physiology after Elena died," Marcus replied, settling on the edge of the bed. "I needed to understand everything about Zara's needs, including the effects of psychic energy use. It's consideration for details most humans never bothered learning," spoke to the depth of his love for his daughter. Watching him gently check Zara's pulse and examine her eyes for signs of quantum exhaustion, Kaylin felt something shift deeper in her chest. Recognition that this man would move worlds for the people he cared about. Over the following weeks, their relationship evolved from professional courtesy to genuine intimacy. Marcus began working from home more often, using his apartment's quantum lab setup to run calculations while staying close to Zara. The 3 of them fell into natural rhythms, shared meals where Kaylin taught them Vexery customs while learning human traditions, evenings spent reading stories that blended Earth's fairy tales with Vexery legends, and quiet moments after Zara's bedtime when Marcus and Kaylin would talk until the early hours. "Tell me about Vexery," Marcus said one evening as they sat on the apartment's balcony, watching the city's bioluminescent architecture pulse in harmony with the planet's rotation. "Not the political or scientific aspects I can read in reports, but what it felt like to live there." Kaylin sipped her weena. Human custom she had grown to appreciate and considered how to explain a world he had never seen. Imagine if every building, every street, every garden was alive and responsive to the emotions of the people within it. Vexery architecture is grown rather than built, shaped by collective psychic energy over generations. When I was happy, my rooms would bloom with crystalline flowers. When I was sad, the walls would weep luminescent tears. "That sounds beautiful and overwhelming," Marcus observed. "It was both," Kaylin agreed. "Privacy becomes a luxury when your environment reflects your emotional state. Royal children learn mental shields early, not just for protection, but for basic dignity." She told him about the weight of expectations that had pressed down on her since childhood, the arranged marriage, the political duties, the constant awareness that her personal desires mattered less than her family's ambitions. In return, Marcus shared his own struggles with balancing scientific passion and parental responsibility. The loneliness that had consumed him after Elena's death, his fears about raising a daughter whose abilities surpassed his understanding. Their emotional intimacy naturally progressed to physical closeness. The first time Marcus kissed her properly, they were in the kitchen preparing dinner while Zara played in the living room. Kaylin had been explaining the molecular differences between Earth's spices and Vexery flavor compounds when she caught him staring at her mouth instead of listening to her words. "Am I boring you?" she teased. "Quite the opposite," he replied, stepping closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I'm thinking about how much I want to kiss you right now." "What's stopping you?" she asked, her pulse quickening as his hands found her waist. Their kiss was tender at first, exploratory, then deeper as weeks of suppressed attraction finally found expression. Kellen's empathic abilities made her acutely aware of his desire, while her own response seemed to amplify his emotions in a feedback loop that left them both breathless. "Daddy. Kaylin, come see my new trick." Zara's voice interrupted them, causing Marcus to jump back with guilty embarrassment. "We should probably talk about this," he said quietly. Later, Kaylin agreed, though the promise in her voice suggested their conversation would involve more touching than talking. That night, after Zara was safely asleep, they found themselves on the living room sofa with a bottle of wine and years of loneliness to overcome. Marcus traced the subtle, luminescent patterns on Kellen's skin marks of her royal heritage that only appeared when she was emotionally aroused. "You're incredible," he whispered, his fingers following the glowing tracery from her collarbone to the sensitive spot just below her ear. "Marcus," she breathed, overwhelmed by the intensity of her feelings. "I need you to know, I've never felt this way before. The marriages arranged for me were political contracts. This is ... love," he suggested, his eyes serious despite the passion burning between them, as she admitted, the word feeling both foreign and perfectly natural there. Lovemaking was a revelation of compatibility that transcended species barriers. Marcus's human emotional depth complemented Kellen's vexery, empathic sensitivity, creating an intimacy neither had imagined possible. When they finally lay entwined in his bedroom, her skin still glowing softly with residual energy, Kaylin felt truly seen for the first time in her life. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, his arm tightening around her as if he feared she might disappear. "Now we build something new," Kaylin replied, pressing her lips to his chest. "A family that chooses itself, rather than accepting what others decide for us." The weeks that followed were the happiest of Kellen's life. She officially moved into Marcus's apartment, transforming the spare bedroom into an office where she could continue her xenobiology studies through Earth's university network. Marcus adjusted his work schedule to maximize family time. While still making significant progress on the quantum communication array, Zara blossomed under their combined attention, her abilities growing stronger and more controlled as she learned from both perspectives of her heritage. She began calling Kaylin almost Mama, a title that made Kaylin's heart soar even as it reminded her of the family they were building. But their happiness was shadowed by external pressures. The Terra Pure movement had intensified their rhetoric against human-alien relationships, and Marcus began receiving anonymous threats at work. Kellen's own past remained a source of anxiety. She knew that her family would eventually discover her location, and royal vexery didn't accept rejection lightly. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner while Zara drew pictures of their unconventional family, Marcus reached across the table to take Kaylin's hand. "Whatever challenges come," he said, seriously, "we face them together. You're part of this family now, permanently if you'll have us." Kaylin squeezed his fingers, feeling the weight of his promise and the depth of her own commitment. One future to find another, but this time she was choosing her destiny with her eyes wide open. "Always," she replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. Outside their apartment, the city hummed with the harmonious blend of human technology and alien innovation. While inside, three beings from two different worlds continued building something entirely new, a love that transcended the boundaries others tried to impose. The crisis Kellen had been dreading arrived on a Tuesday morning disguised as routine bureaucracy. She was helping Zara practice fine motor control by having the child use telekinesis to arrange breakfast items when the apartment's security system announced visitors. The holographic display showed two figures in the distinctive blue and silver uniforms of Vexery Royal Guard. "Stay with Zara," Kaylin told Marcus, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Whatever happens, don't let them see her abilities." The guards, Captain Zyron and Commander Vex, according to their identification, entered with the formal bearing that Kaylin remembered from her father's court. Their presence transformed the cozy apartment into a diplomatic battleground, formal, protocols clashing with domestic warmth. "Your Highness," Captain Zyron said, offering the traditional bow reserved for royal family members. "Your father commands your immediate return to Vexery Prime. The wedding arrangements with Prince Dalthon have been finalized." "I renounce my titles and my place in the succession," Kellen replied formally, drawing herself up with the royal bearing that years of training had made instinctive. "I am no longer subject to House Thorne's authority." Royal blood cannot be renounced. Highness Commander, Vex interjected. Your duty to the people supersedes personal preference. The alliance with House Carrion requires this marriage. Marcus stepped forward. Instinctively protective, despite being outmatched by beings whose military training included psychic combat techniques. This is Earth territory. You have no legal authority here. We have authority over our own citizens, Captain Zyron replied coldly. Princess Kellen's presence here is considered a diplomatic incident that threatens the stability of both our species relations. Zara, who had been quietly observing from behind the kitchen counter, suddenly stood up with the fearless determination that hybrid children seem to possess in abundance. You can't take her away. She belongs with us. The moment Zara spoke, her emotions spiked, and the apartment's quantum field began to fluctuate. Both guards immediately recognized the disturbance, their expressions shifting from diplomatic formality to shocked amazement. Natural quantum manipulator, Commander Vex whispered. Your Highness, you've bonded with a hybrid who possesses unprecedented psychic potential. Her name is Zara, Kellen said firmly, and she's my family. Captain Zyron activated a holographic communicator, speaking rapidly in high Vexery dialect to someone off-screen. Kellen caught fragments of the conversation words about strategic opportunities and reconsideration of arrangements that made her stomach clench with familiar dread. New instructions, the captain announced after ending his call. Princess Kellen and the hybrid child are both to return to Vexery Prime immediately. The Royal Council wishes to evaluate the child's potential for advanced training. Absolutely not, Marcus said, his voice carrying an edge of steel that Kalen had never heard before.